Thank you, Count Corla. Well, seeing as Deputy Boyd Barrett nearly gave us $5 billion extra there, I thought I might be a bit shorter myself. So, first of all, Minister Chambers, I'd like to firstly congratulate you. You're probably the youngest minister in the Cabinet, so I hope you do well, and I hope you're not. Well, there you go. I won't ask who is, but congratulations, and I hope it works out well for you. I welcome the bill as it stands, and I think the regional group certainly will be supporting it. I am concerned, though, and I get very concerned when I look at the day-to-day COVID, everything that's happening, whether we go up or down in the increased numbers. But I really do worry for the fallout that we face as an economy, particularly for our SME sector. Their staff, their customers, it's a huge concern. There are 250,000 SMEs in the country, providing 1.2 million jobs, and 68% of those jobs are actually outside of Dublin. So we are very much relying on the SME sector in the country, particularly tourism and hospitality. In the country, that sector caters for 266,000 jobs, and 9,300 of them are actually in Wexford. A large number of the businesses have already closed up, and others are not knowing where they are at the moment. But they all have similar challenges when I speak to them. And I think many of the SME sectors have three things in common at the moment. One is the lack of cash flow, two is short-term working capital, and three is liquidity. They're their major concerns when you discuss any type of financing with them. And they're all saying similar things in relation to COVID finance, whether it be the restart package, whether it's the micro-enterprise bill, or whether it's this bill, which, being 142 pages long, I didn't exactly get to look at it in depth. But certainly their fears are, and what they will all say in commonality as well, is that the interest rates for all of the finance packages are too high. They can't afford, or they're not able to meet the loan requirements, and they don't have enough business to generate the repayment, even if they could get the loan. So I think what we have to be mindful of here is that the micro-enterprise interest rate in the money being provided in the micro-enterprise financing is above 4%. It might sound cheap, and we might say that interest rates are low, but that's not cheap for a struggling business. For a business who is probably down at a bare minimum of 30% of its footfall, depending on cash flow, that is not cheap finance. And as you have heard me say previously in the House, insolvency experts have said that the restart package should have been 10 times what it was. So my concern is that whilst we will have provision within this legislation to look after the 1.2 million workers, we need to look after the SMEs that provide those jobs, and we need to do it to the point of where we're currently in the middle of the worst health crisis that this country, in my living memory, has ever seen. But we're about to get into what will be equally a catastrophe called Brexit. And we're going from one to the other, and I am concerned about whether or not our financing of Brexit, whether these types of financing that we're doing now for COVID, will these impinge on our ability to finance Brexit? Because I see COVID as a trial run for Brexit. I would anticipate it in the logistics sector, having dealt with many of the SMEs for the last 30 years in business, drawing all types of goods. I anticipate Brexit to be just one bigger calamity, or equally as big as COVID has been. And people might find that hard to believe, but on top of COVID, the potential crisis is very, very real. So I think the mixed messages that are going out every day, as I said, is that interest rates are low, but everybody says that that is not a practical measure or a practical application of finance interest rates on loan supports for struggling businesses. And often they say that they're far too complicated, and they seem to be more of a benefit to the financial institution than of assistance to them as SMEs. And I think that's something that's been alluded to by many colleagues today, that the benefit often from financial loans of this nature doesn't actually come down to the SME or to the businesses that it's being provided for. So the bill, while it contains supports to mitigate unemployment risks in an emergency, which is what we call SURE as an acronym. These loans are being underpinned by a system of voluntary guarantee by member states. So I think on that basis I'd add a word of caution. And I've already stated it, and I've stated it previously in the House, that our first support must be to the SMEs to remain and keep them in business, rather than the short-time work schemes. We need to support the self-employed to stay self-employed and to sustain that position. If we don't ensure affordable and meaningful supports for our SMEs through COVID and Brexit, they won't survive. We're on a fool's errand passing legislation that won't support that position because our loan guarantees will be called in. I'm asking for the Minister to ensure 0% rates for government loans at a minimum for the future. What I'd also ask, and these are points just to note, Minister, from my interaction with businesses and their understanding and smaller financial institutions, that the ECB needs to actively support their member states immediately in these unprecedented times. The central bank needs to continue to modify their rules on pillar banks immediately to allow them the flexibility that's essential to support businesses. Businesses who rely on cash flow, if there's more money coming in than going out, in any business, that's a positive situation, but it's an unlikely situation for many for the near future. So we need extremely low interest rates. We need to ensure that the pillar banks are making businesses aware of the SBCI supports, because that's another thing. Many businesses are just not aware, and I'd ask you that you ensure that the pillar banks make the SMEs aware of their eligibility and do everything possible to allow them to apply for these loans to sustain them in the future. Thank you.